Go to TAPgiles.com to learn dreams, engage my services, and support the channel. I'll just show you a thing I made using that whole thing. Pixel tap, because naming things is hard. So yeah, I can hold X to draw pixels and triangle to delete them. And if I hover over the top left, I have this whole like color selection, like all the range of colors, kind of in theory. And I can draw with whatever color I want, and I'll turn off the UI. And that's how I made this, basically. I think what I'll do is build something so you can place blocks. Yeah, so I'm going to use a hand tracker which moves with the imp, and it actually has these laser settings which let you get the hit position of that line going out in front of the imp, so you can point at things and you can get the position in the world of that thing you're pointing at. But it kind of behaves strangely. It's not like constantly live, it's a bit laggy sort of thing. So I tend to use a laser scope and just, it's effectively that laser in the hand tracker is the same thing theoretically, but the laser scope doesn't have that funny lag to it. So I'll make that nice and long, make it only care about scenery. Okay, and then I'll make this scenery. And then I'll have a block so I kind of know what I'm pointing at. And this will add a chip to it and put some text on it to display. And use UI target as the icon. In the scene, allow rotation, always on top. And the funny thing with text gadgets is they're never quite central to the actual objects, to the grid. So you have to do it by eye. Okay, that'll do. Make this invisible, non-collidable, and I'll turn off preview invisibility so I can see the invisible stuff anyway. Make it a different color. And cool, so now I want this to move where I'm pointing. So I'll have a follower, and for tidiness, I'm going to have a node so I can just wire into this input node. So hit position into there. I'll actually, because you want it to snap to the grid, I'm actually going to have a separate chip. I've used this a few times in my daily, on those tweets I give them the hashtag daydream and made in dreams. So if you search for daydream, made in dreams, TAPgiles, you'll find them. So we get the position, and yeah, if I just put that straight out into here, and then there into the follower, then we're telling the follower what position to go to. Let's max out these while we're there. Oh, we got to wire them together. Right, so it kind of looks funny because if I demonstrate what's going on, if I made a straight line on the grid, you can see how it actually is angled. So you can see it's actually parallel to the camera, so it is moving this amount, but it's not like pointing from the center of the camera through the imp tip and on, which would actually point at like the corner there, but it's going from like parallel to the way the camera is pointing. So you can change that by setting it to gun style, so you're kind of pointing outward like this. And that'll be good enough, I think. But it's kind of one-to-one. We don't actually want it one-to-one because I want it on a grid. So in here we're going to do some shenanigans. We're going to have a separate input, a second input for the number of the gap between the grid points that we're going to use. So this position is, you can see it's braided colours, not just one colour. That means it's a fat wire with lots of values going through it instead of one value. So in this case, it's got 3 values that correspond to X, Y, and Z. And we want to round those values to the nearest integer, like this with a calculator. And that applies to all of the round X, rounds Y, and round Z. And then combine them again and then split them out. And then we'll just use that. So what does that do? So now it snaps to grid points. I'll just add a camera. There you go. Snapping to the nearest grid point, but I want it to not necessarily just be every integer, but every half integer maybe. In which case we can like if you multiply this by 10, if you had like let's do it. Let's do an example. So if you multiplied this value by 10, and it was like 0.3, or no, let's multiply it by 2, 0.3, and that becomes 0.6 over here. I'll just turn that off. 0.6. If you then rounded that, that will go to the nearest integer. And then if you divide it again by that same amount, it will get back to the same scale. So instead of it being like huge gaps now, it will go huge gaps, then round to the nearest integer, then collapse it back down to little gaps, which gets you, it kind of rounds to the nearest half, because I used 2 for this. So now it will like snap to 1 or half or 0 instead of all integers. Now if we had another thing representing the steps, like the size between each grid point, so if we wanted each step to be half, we want to use 2 in these, and if we wanted it to be 0.1, we want to use 10 for these. So if I did 10 and 10, now it's going to snap to the normal like 0 point something, just to one place. I'm just going to use a calculator to better demonstrate this, because that has up to 0.01 precision. Yeah, so we can go like, it will snap to the 0.1 instead of 0.9 and so on, because we put 10 in these. So if we wanted 0.1 between each of them, we want this to be 10, and you can get that by 1 divided by this smaller number, and that will kind of get you the value you need, basically. So 1 divided by the step, and wire that in there, wire that in there. Oh, that's got to be on overwrite mode, so it actually sets it, not multiplies it. So that's snapping to 0.1 precision from this, and so on. And you could do other numbers like every 0.3 and every 0.5. But I find that this kind of number is easier to think about, the size of the grid. So this would be outside here, and wire into it through a node. That would be the actual input. So that will multiply it, that will snap it to the 0.5 grid. Cool, so that's kind of, the Dreams logo is like 2 notches across. And if I set that to 1, now it's just 1 notch across, sort of thing.
Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something interesting. Go to patreon.com/TAPgiles to learn something new every day.